Hi, good morning guys. This video we're going to speak a little bit about gearing on the bike, how it affects the bike. We're going to speak about gearing as in the final drive, what we call it. So that's chain and sprocket, which is a product which you have to change just through maintenance of the bike when it gets to certain miles. And you don't always have to put the same chain and sprocket on what the bike comes from the manufacturer. You can change the quantity of teeth, the pitch of the chain, many of the things what we're going to talk about in this video, and we'll explain how it affects the bike, how it benefits and doesn't in different circumstances. So yeah, that's what we're really going to try and get you to understand. This video might be a bit long, but we'll split into sections so you can jump to the sections what will be into your interest. So here we are. Okay, so what we're going to go across is the front, rear sprocket and chain. So one thing what's really confusing for people is that the bigger your rear sprocket, basically it makes the gearing shorter, and it's the complete opposite with your front. So bigger the front sprocket, it makes the gearing longer. So it's vice versa. That's, some people get that confused. And what we do when we change the teeth, we can change the smaller or bigger sprockets, like adding teeth or decreasing teeth to the sprockets. Usually on the racetrack, we work lots with the rear sprocket, because one tooth, what you change on the rear sprocket, equivalents to in between 2 to 3 teeth on the front sprocket, depending on things like chain pitch. Depends on the chain pitch, it's in between 2 to 3. It's a little bit more technical, but yeah, basically, if you have less teeth on the rear, the bike will have more top speed but less acceleration. More teeth, if you imagine like a trials bike, it's got a real big rear sprocket compared to a race bike what's got a smaller rear sprocket. Right, so what we can go across now is the ratio formula we use to calculate if gearing's longer or shorter. So like I said before, if some people get confused on the fact that the front sprocket and the rear sprocket work vice versa. So bigger front sprocket means the gearing is longer, compared to the big rear sprocket means the gearing is shorter. So what we can do is use a simple math. You divide the amount of teeth you got on the rear sprocket compared to the amount of teeth you got on the front sprocket, and that'll give you a number. And the higher the number, the gearing will be shorter. That means there'll be more acceleration, less top speed, and then vice versa. The lower the number, you will have longer gearing. That'll mean you'll have more top speed, but less acceleration. Right, so another thing to take into consideration is the chain length. So when you go to a small rear sprocket or a bigger rear sprocket, the chain length will vary. If you go to a small rear sprocket, the chain will be longer, therefore you will have to adjust the rear wheel backwards. But it gets to a point that there's no more adjustment either backwards or forwards, and you will have to start cutting links out of the chain. One thing what people think, a lot of people think, I've heard them talk about, is maybe like they think if it's one tooth on the rear sprocket, it's one link out of the chain, and that's not like that. It's a lot more complex. It depends on the chain pitch as well. It's, if you're running like a 520 chain to a 540 chain, it's completely different. So on the website on Damspot, they've got a system where you can put your brand and model of bike on there, and what gearing you've got, what gearing you want to run, and that'll come out with the chain length, what's appropriate for that bike. In the racing world, it's a little bit different because you're always looking for that fine tuning. So sometimes we will compromise on gearing, maybe a tooth up or a tooth down, just so that the rear wheel is in the correct position, because it'll either stabilize the bike more or it'll stop the bike wheeling. If it's a longer bike, it'll stop the bike wheeling. It can get really, really complicated. But for most people riding bikes on the road, anywhere in the ballpark of the swing arm is good enough. Alright, so all this we've gone across might seem a bit confusing for some about chain length and stuff, but here on the website, because of modern day and age technology, we've got a real cool system. What basically you can just put the like I say, the make and model of your motorcycle in, and it'll come up with a program where it'll give you the standard configuration of the sprockets and chain, and then as from there you can select each one and change the configuration. So you can go here into the sprocket and say change from a 16 tooth, what comes standard, maybe say alright, we want to go to maybe a 14 tooth sprocket. So you go into 14 tooth sprocket and it recalculates here the acceleration speed, and this is just an estimate, and it compares it against, here you can see 1645 to a 1445 sprocket, and then it recalculates as well chain length. So here it says current chain length is 116 teeth, and the standard chain length is 118. So this is incredibly helpful, because back in the day you always need to get a chain and start cutting it down yourself and calculating, and this is it all for you, absolutely no problem. And like I said, like changing sprockets and gear on the bike is so valuable. Like people spend lots of money tuning bikes and putting expensive exhausts on to make it faster, and just changing the sprockets, just changing the gearing, what customizes it for you for your riding needs, is so good. Alright, so as well, I can go across what types of sprockets you can get and where you can upgrade as well a little bit. So we'll talk about front sprockets first. Basically this is just a basic steel front sprocket. Pretty much all front sprockets are steel, and this is what you're gonna find on pretty much every bike. It's just a normal steel sprocket. But what's out now is a sprocket like this, which has like these rubber sides on it, and this is really cool because certain bikes, when you like coasting, you sometimes get like they call it chain slap, and as you're coasting off gas, you get the chain what sort of jerks the bike, and basically the chain runs on the top of this rubber, and it improves that. It improves it a lot, and financially they cost pretty much the same, this sprocket to say this sprocket, which is the standard sprocket. It's not for all bikes. Some bikes are worse or better, like with the chain slap, but a lot of like big adventure touring bikes suffer with it, just the way it is. So that's a real cool upgrade. And then you get sprockets like this, which is just the same as a conventional one, but it's got holes drilled to make it a bit lighter, just a bit of a higher end sprocket, but nothing different there. Then going on to the rear sprocket, this is where like most differences are. This is the steel sprocket, which is what you're going to see on pretty much all bikes, made out of steel, just one single material all around, and this is the most durable. But what they've got as well is aluminium sprockets, which is less durable, but yes, it's considerably lighter. So aluminium sprockets will be used more on motocross bikes, and smaller engine race bikes will all opt for aluminium sprockets, just purely because of the weight, as well on the wheels, which is spinning, centrifugal force and things like that, you do feel a difference. But as soon as you get to a bigger bike where you've got more horsepower, even in race bikes, we use steel sprockets many times. And then you've got the best of both worlds, which is a dual compound, I guess you'd call it, dual material, whatever, which is aluminium inside, which is what you bolt to the rim, and then the steel on the outside, which you've got the durability of the steel and the lightweight of the aluminium. And then obviously you got the cool colour combos. You can have it in two colours. These are really common, I know, in like the Dakar Rally and a lot of the enduro races. Really like these. So yeah, they're the three different sprockets you get, which is a really cool upgrade for the bike. Right, so what we'll go over as well is the chain itself, which for me I think is more important the type of chain than the material of sprockets, which is, you know, it's important as well. But for me, the actual chain itself is more important to your needs. So you got like here, we'll show you just like a normal standard chain, which this doesn't have any O-rings or now what they call X-rings, which is like the upgrade. This is just all steel, no sealing, which requires higher maintenance, so it needs cleaning and greasing more often than like a sealed chain, which we'll go across now. This is super common on like smaller bikes and motocross bikes. It's pretty common. But then we get the sealed chains, which I'll get out here. Yeah. So a chain like this has rubber seals in between every link. So that means it's greased and the grease stays in like a sealed bearing. It's the same, it's a sealed system in the chain. Some people, they went through a period saying it doesn't need greasing, but yeah, I think it does. I've got these chains, I run them all the time, and when you clean the bike and you don't grease them, they end up getting rusty. So I always grease them. One thing to note, it requires a special grease. I think pretty much most chain lubes nowadays are good enough for the O-ring and X-ring chains, which you'll see used on the chain lubes. It'll mention that it's apt for that chain, because some older chain lubes, it may be corrosive for the rubber, and then it'll end up breaking the rubber down, and then it'll destroy the chain. So this is an O-ring chain, which the O-ring, basically, like I say, it's a small O-ring in between every link. Now they've upgraded to a higher end chain, which we'll get here, which is an X-ring chain. Basically, I explain the difference between an O-ring and an X-ring. An O-ring, if you can imagine, an O is a solid cylinder against a surface. It's got more friction than an X, which is in the X shape, and it only touches in two parts, not a whole part. Less friction, and because it's got 2 points of contact, maybe the sealing is better. That's something which we'd have to put to test. But for sure the friction is less, and I've got the X-ring on my bike, and I've compared it to an O-ring. When you just spin the wheel, it definitely spins more with an X-ring chain than an O-ring. They are a bit more expensive, but as fuel consumption, as acceleration, I think acceleration on big touring bikes with plenty of horsepower, which most bikes have nowadays, you don't feel the difference that much. But especially like motocross bikes and competition bikes, X-ring it's the higher end, and it's the way to go, right? And but another thing with the sealed chains is the cleaning side of things. Like I said, the chain lube needs to be the correct chain lube to not damage the O-ring. But same as like if you're using these on, say, off-road bikes or adventure bikes, the ones with no O-rings, you can get the jet washer on there, clean them out really good, and then lube them up. Jet washing close to rubber parts is not good. You're going to get water in there, and then the water can't get back out, and most surely you'll damage the chain. So the cleaning, it's a little bit. You don't have to clean them as often or grease them as often as one without a link. But when it comes to cleaning them, you just have to be a little bit more careful. And as well, we have to know how to put the chain on the bike. So there's various different options of how the chain gets attached to the bike. It depends. Most commonly on like motocross bikes and small engine bikes, it's just a normal split link, which you'll find as well on cycling bikes, which it's like a fork link what goes over the clip, and it's really easy to put on and remove with just a pair of pliers. You can do it. And it's common, like I said, on motocross bikes, and it's easy to take the chain off, to maintenance, to clean the chain, and various things. This is not a common way for bigger engine bikes, just purely because it's not as safe. I've never had one come off on a motocross bike in all my life, but bigger horsepower bikes on in road racing, they're all riveted on. So to rivet a chain on there's a couple of tools you can get to do that. This is just a budget tool, like a little over 20 euros. Which you can screw it on. It's literally one of the pins in the link what you get with the chain is hollow, and it flares out, so you can put this on, screw the 2 screws in and tighten it up, and it'll essentially rivet, so it'll push the hollow pins out and secure the chain to the bike. The trouble with this is, like I say, it's a budget one, and you have to tighten it pretty tight so that it rivets correctly, and the threads can get worn. So you use it a couple of times and it wears. On the other hand, if you're going to be doing it more often, you can get a tool like this one, which is a little bit over 100 euros, so it's like big difference in price. But yeah, you can use this a million times and it's good to go. There's another way that some chains are put on bikes, and they sometimes come standard, is a closed chain. So it's not got a link what's different to the rest, so it's not got a riveted link or a split link. But these chains usually come on standard bikes, and to get these chains, to put these chains on, you take the swinging arm off the bike, and basically if you're going to be modifying your bike, you're not going to be getting one of the chains. It's just not worth it. Like I say, when from the factory, sometimes they come with one of them chains because it's easier for them, because they're building the bike from ground up. If not, the 2 most common types are the riveted chain and the common split link, which is for, like I say, MX bikes and smaller engine bikes. Right, so we're going to go across chain pitch as well. So chain pitch is well confusing for some people, and basically it's something what you don't really have to, you shouldn't be changing the chain pitch on your bike from where it comes standard. But as you can see, this is a 525, this is a 530, you can see 530, and this is a 520. This is the size, the length of in between link and link of the chain. As from how they come the bike standard, if on the program, as on the website we've seen, it comes with, say it says 520 for that model bike, you just want to stay with 520. Unless it's a super modified bike, say if you're making like a drag racer or something and you want to put a bigger chain on because you've upped the horsepower heaps, or if it's a small engine bike and you want a smaller chain for less drag. But this is like in very unique situations where it's a highly modified bike. If not, if it comes standard with the 520, it stays with the 520. That's, I think, the most important thing. And then the other thing is, when it comes to chains, I always recommend a good chain. It's always best to invest in a good chain, purely because if a chain breaks, it can be catastrophic. So it can either wrap around the rear wheel and lock up, and that could be very catastrophic, as in you could crash. Or it could wrap around the front sprocket, and it's happened to me a couple of times where its chain's broke, wrapped around the front sprocket, and it's broke the crank casing. So it's always best to invest in like a DID chain or an RK chain, which is a renowned brand and a high quality one. The bit more money you spend, it's going to be better on fuel consumption because of less friction, and the durability is going to be better. Right, as well, there's things over the internet now, because I know it's the prime place to look for information when you want to invest in something new. We've been seeing lots of things about hardened chains and more reinforced chains. And that's a little bit of a myth. I think if just any renowned brand comes with the chains what pass the tests, and they're plenty good enough. Things about hardened chains, reinforced chains, that doesn't exist. For some reason, there's some certain brands which are selling, like I said, chains which are saying that they're reinforced. That doesn't exist. I think when it comes down to how steels work and people hardening steels and tempering steels, it's a little bit more complex, and the chain brands, the renowned chain brands, have done the homework and they know what lasts and what's durable, how it should flex certain materials. So like I said, just any renowned brand is I think the safe way to go. Yeah, so seeing as we've gone over all the differences with chains and everything and sprockets, yeah, basically I think it's one of the best upgrades you can get for your bike. Me personally, I've just bought a brand new motocross bike, the new Triumph 450, and I go to my local track and the jump, well, it's just after some whoop sections and I can't clear the jump. I'm always in between gears. I just change my rear sprocket and I put 2 teeth difference on and I can clear the jump easily. Basically what I'm saying, it's a modification to the bike which is very economical compared to big engine improvements. What makes a huge difference. It's one of the best things to do, and that's on racetrack, but even on a production bike for the road, it's so beneficial. I think it's something you don't, when you come to the date, you have to change your chain and sprocket. You don't always have to put the same amount of teeth on the sprocket the way it comes standard. Knowing that what comes out of the showroom standard, it's always usually a good starting point, but for each different rider and the personal preference, it's good to know that there's improvements to be made. And it's just as easy as to go on the website, you select your vehicle, go here, say for example, you're just going to go for a vehicle what we know is pretty common, so we go to the manufacturer, go down, say look for a Yamaha 2020, this is just an example, you see, and we'll just go to say like for example MT-07, which is a super common bike, a real good bike, and then go to find, and then we go down into the transmission, go chain kits, down, and here is the customizable chain kits. So you go in and here we are, you get the make and model of your bike, and you go to sprockets, chain, and this default it come up with the budget pack, so it's financially the most budget pack, but you can go into anything, go into chains for example. So here we've got all the different chains you can select from, like we spoke before, like the X-ring chains, and then like we mentioned about the different oils and things you can use, and the riveting tools. You can go down to accessories, and usually on the oils it'll tell you if it's apt for different O-rings and X-rings, and then here you've got the different tools, which is really good, really interesting, and yeah, there you have it. Like I say, it's a fantastic upgrade for your bike when it comes to the day to changing your chain. You can always upgrade it, change the sprockets, change the quantity of teeth, just to make an improvement for how you need it. And yeah, saying that, thanks to everyone watching, and hope this info is valuable for you, and see you next time.